From the outside, Samantha LOL and Nathan LOL were the epitome of a perfect couple. Their whirlwind romance had captured the hearts of their friends and family, he, a successful and charming investment banker. She, a radiant young woman who had always dreamed of her fairy tale wedding. The wedding itself had been nothing short of magical. A grand ceremony in an elegant ballroom, chandeliers glowing as guests admired the extravagance. Samantha walked down the aisle in a custom-designed gown, her eyes shining with love as she met Nathan at the altar. The way he gazed at her made onlookers believe in love stories. They exchanged vows with heartfelt words, promising to cherish each other for a lifetime. The media took notice of their grand affair. Photos of the newlyweds were featured in lifestyle magazines, showcasing the glamour of their union. Their honeymoon was set to be just as spectacular. A week at the exclusive Pearl Reef Resort in the Bahamas, a paradise known for its white sandy beaches, crystal-clear waters, and private luxury villas. It seemed like the perfect beginning to a lifetime of happiness. But beneath the surface, cracks had already begun to form. When Nathan and Samantha arrived at Pearl Reef Resort, the staff treated them like royalty. The moment they stepped onto the island, a concierge greeted them with warm smiles and flutes of champagne. The manager personally escorted them to their private oceanfront villa, an opulent suite with a breathtaking view of the sea. To a lifetime of happiness, Nathan had toasted, clinking his glass against Samantha's. She smiled, but those who later looked back on that moment would wonder. Was there hesitation in her eyes? For the first 2 days, they indulged in luxury. Mornings were spent sipping tropical cocktails by the infinity pool. Afternoons filled with snorkeling and boat rides, and evenings under the stars. Enjoying candle-lit dinners on the beach. Samantha's social media was filled with happy snapshots, smiling selfies, picturesque sunsets, and gourmet meals. To the world, they were living the dream. But small, almost imperceptible signs of unease had started to appear. A housekeeper later recalled an odd moment. Samantha, usually warm and polite, seemed unusually tense when she came to clean the suite. Her shoulders were stiff as she quickly gathered towels from the bathroom, avoiding prolonged conversation. A bartender at the resort's beachside bar also remembered seeing her alone one evening. She had ordered a drink and stared at the waves for a long time, her expression unreadable. When Nathan finally approached her, she flinched at his touch. It was a fleeting moment, one most wouldn't have thought much about at the time. But looking back, it painted a different story. The cracks in their seemingly perfect honeymoon became more noticeable on their 3rd day. Witnesses recalled moments that felt off. At dinner, Nathan's arm was around Samantha, but her body language seemed guarded. Other guests noticed her glancing at him with what could have been nervousness, something that didn't fit the image of a blissful newlywed. That evening, the resort had arranged a private beachside dinner for the couple, a romantic setup with a table under glowing lanterns, waves gently crashing nearby. From a distance it looked idyllic. The other guests saw them laughing, sipping wine and sharing a dessert. But those who observed closely noted a shift in energy. Nathan leaned in to say something and Samantha's laughter stopped. She lowered her gaze, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. The smile she gave in response seemed forced. No one could have guessed that this would be the last night of Samantha LOL's life. Around midnight, the peaceful ambiance of Pearl Reef Resort was shattered by strange noises. Several guests in nearby villas were woken by what sounded like an argument. A male voice, sharp and angry, followed by a softer muffled cry. One couple, staying just a few doors down, later recalled hearing a loud thud, followed by a tense silence. Then footsteps. A door opening, closing. Was it just a passionate lover's quarrel? A drunken disagreement? At the time, no one was concerned enough to investigate. Arguments happened. People drank too much, emotions ran high. The noises stopped after a while and the resort remained silent again. But by morning, Samantha would be gone. The next morning, as the sun rose over the ocean, an unnatural tension hung in the air. The resort staff noticed something unusual. Nathan was alone. He walked into the lobby looking disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his hair messy. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. He approached the front desk and spoke in a voice that was calm but unsteady. "My wife. She went for a swim last night. She never came back." The words sent a ripple of alarm through the resort. Samantha was missing. The search began immediately. Resort staff, security officers, and local authorities spread out across the beach, calling her name. Other guests, sipping their morning coffee on their balconies, noticed the commotion and word quickly spread. But as the search intensified, something about Nathan's behavior stood out. He didn't rush to the shore, frantically calling for his wife. He didn't demand answers, urging the staff to do more. He didn't break down in panic, fearing for her safety. Instead, he stood in the lobby, watching. His hands ran through his hair repeatedly. His breath came in shallow gasps. He was playing the part of a distressed husband. But something felt off. Within hours, the search team made a grim discovery. Near the rocky shoreline, partially concealed by large boulders, lay Samantha's lifeless body. Her arms were bent at unnatural angles. Her face was swollen and bruised. Her dark hair was tangled with seaweed. At first, it looked like a tragic accident, a woman swept away by the tide, her body battered by the rocks. But something wasn't right. And as Officer Marcus Bellamy examined the scene, a sinking feeling settled in his gut. This wasn't an accident. Samantha had been murdered. The moment Samantha's body was discovered near the rocky shoreline, the atmosphere at Pearl Reef Resort shifted from peaceful to tense. Authorities were called in immediately, and Officer Marcus Bellamy, a seasoned investigator with years of experience handling drowning cases, arrived at the scene. As he examined Samantha's lifeless form, a deep sense of unease settled in his gut. Something about her injuries didn't add up. Her arms were bent at unnatural angles, covered in deep bruises that looked more like they had been caused by forceful gripping rather than the natural impact of ocean waves. Her face was swollen, her skull visibly fractured, and yet there was no water in her lungs, meaning she hadn't drowned. Bellamy had seen plenty of tragic accidents before, but this wasn't one of them. It looked staged. Nathan was brought to the scene, his expression unreadable at first. When the officer informed him of Samantha's death, his reaction was sudden and almost theatrical. He let out a loud, anguished cry, collapsed to his knees, and clutched his face. His shoulders shook as if consumed by grief, but something about it seemed off. Bellamy had seen true despair before, panicked husbands begging to see their wives, inconsolable partners desperate for answers. But Nathan? He never asked to see Samantha's body. He didn't rush forward in disbelief, demanding to hold her one last time. Instead, he kept his distance, his grief performative rather than genuine. Nathan's version of events was murky from the start. He told the authorities that Samantha had been drinking heavily the previous night and decided to go for a late-night swim alone. When he woke up in the morning, she was gone. His voice trembled as he spoke, but his eyes darted around, avoiding direct contact with the officers. Bellamy listened carefully, noting the inconsistencies. If Samantha had been so intoxicated, why did her toxicology report show only a small amount of alcohol in her system? If she had truly gone swimming, why were there no footprints leading from their villa to the water? Most troubling of all, why had Nathan waited until morning to report her missing? The resort staff began sharing their own observations. A housekeeper recalled an argument she overheard earlier that evening. A man's raised voice, followed by a softer, pleading tone. A bartender who had served Nathan a few drinks mentioned how he had been drinking alone, staring at his glass with dark, brooding intensity. Then there was the surveillance footage. At 3:12 a.m., Nathan had been caught on camera leaving the suite, carrying a bundle of dark clothing. He had looked around nervously before heading towards the beach. An hour later, he returned, his posture tense, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Bellamy's suspicions grew. The pieces didn't fit together. It was becoming clear. Samantha hadn't simply wandered off. Something terrible had happened in that hotel suite, and Nathan was hiding the truth. As authorities secured the crime scene, forensic investigators searched the couple's suite, hoping to find clues that would explain what really happened that night. At first glance, the room looked untouched. Clothes neatly folded, luggage still packed. The bed seemingly made. But as they looked closer, the illusion of order unraveled. The bed was in disarray, pillows thrown onto the floor, as if a struggle had taken place. A broken glass lay near the minibar, its shards scattered across the carpet. The most damning discovery, however, was in the bathroom. Under normal light, the surfaces seemed spotless, but a forensic test revealed the truth: traces of blood on the edge of the sink and in the grout between the tiles. Someone had tried to clean it, but not well enough. The samples were collected, and when tested, they confirmed what Bellamy already suspected. The blood belonged to Samantha. At this point, the case was shifting from a missing persons report to a full-blown homicide investigation. But before the authorities could make an arrest, they needed something more. Motive. Digging into Nathan's background, investigators uncovered something shocking. The charming, wealthy investment banker wasn't as successful as he had claimed. His financial records revealed a different story. Nathan was drowning in debt, his lavish lifestyle a fragile illusion built on bad investments and gambling losses. He had maxed out credit cards, defaulted on payments, and was facing pressure from creditors. His once promising career was unraveling. Then, there was the most telling discovery of all. 3 months before their wedding, Nathan had taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on Samantha. He was listed as the sole beneficiary. The timing was too convenient to ignore. Investigators now believed that Nathan never truly loved Samantha. He had married her as part of a calculated plan. By staging her tragic death during their honeymoon, he could collect the insurance payout and escape his financial troubles. As this information surfaced, Bellamy and his team knew they were close. They had motive, they had circumstantial evidence, but what they needed was witness testimony, someone who could place Nathan at the scene of the crime. And soon, an unexpected witness would come forward with exactly that. Just as investigators were building their case, a guest at Pearl Reef Resort came forward with a crucial piece of evidence. Daniel Greaves, a tourist staying at the resort, had been out for a late-night walk along the beach on the night of Samantha's disappearance. At the time, he hadn't thought much about what he saw, but after hearing about Samantha's death, he realized he might have witnessed something important. Daniel recalled seeing a man and a woman near the cliffs, engaged in what seemed like a heated argument. Though he hadn't been close enough to hear their words, the body language had been unmistakable: aggression, tension, fear. The man had grabbed the woman's wrist forcefully, yanking her back when she tried to pull away. She had raised a hand in what looked like a defensive gesture, but he had tightened his grip. The confrontation had lasted only a few minutes before Daniel had walked away, assuming it was just a lover's quarrel. When Daniel checked his phone, he found a blurry photo he had taken of the shoreline that night. It wasn't clear enough to show faces, but it captured the couple in the distance, time-stamped at around 3:15 a.m. The exact time Nathan had been seen sneaking out of the suite. This was it. The missing piece. The testimony placed Nathan at the crime scene, contradicting his claim that he had been sleeping in their villa. With this new evidence, authorities moved in to make an arrest. Nathan, who had been preparing to leave the Bahamas, was stopped at the airport just before boarding his flight. When officers placed the handcuffs on his wrists, his reaction was eerily calm. He didn't protest, he didn't struggle. He simply sighed, as if he had always known this moment would come. The dream honeymoon had ended in horror, and the man who was supposed to love and protect Samantha had instead become her killer. Nathan Lowell stood in the bustling airport terminal, trying to remain calm as he waited for his flight back to the United States. His posture was stiff, his grip on his boarding pass tight, and his gaze constantly flickered toward the departure screens. He had told resort staff and investigators that he needed to return home to grieve in private, but his sudden decision to leave the Bahamas raised suspicion. To the authorities, it looked less like grief and more like an escape. The evidence against him had been mounting. His conflicting statements, the bloodstains found in the hotel suite, the inconsistencies in the timeline, and now a witness placing him at the crime scene. The final piece had been the discovery of his financial records, revealing that he was drowning in debt and had taken out $1 million life insurance policy on Samantha just months before their wedding. With this, Detective Aaron Vickers knew they had enough to make an arrest. As Nathan approached the security checkpoint, his name was suddenly called over the airport's intercom. "Mr. Nathan Lowell, please report to the nearest security desk." He froze, his muscles tensing, and for a brief moment, panic flickered across his face. Before he could react, two uniformed officers approached him, their presence causing a ripple of murmurs among the nearby passengers. One of the officers pulled out a pair of handcuffs and said firmly, "Nathan Lowell, you're under arrest for the murder of Samantha Lowell." Nathan's eyes darted toward the exit as if contemplating a last-minute escape, but he quickly realized there was no way out. With a sharp exhale, he muttered, "You're making a mistake." The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, and he was led away, his face unreadable. Around him, travelers whispered in hushed voices, watching as the man who had once been a picture-perfect groom was now escorted away in disgrace. Nathan's arrest became an international sensation. News outlets ran dramatic headlines like "Honeymoon Horror, Husband Accused of Murder," and social media exploded with theories about what had really happened that night. Some people believed Nathan had carefully orchestrated the murder for financial gain, while others insisted he was being framed. True crime enthusiasts dissected every detail of the case, and Samantha's tragic story quickly became a media obsession. By the time the trial began, the courtroom was packed with journalists, legal experts, and members of the public eager to witness the proceedings. Nathan's defense team worked hard to paint him as a grieving husband who had been wrongfully accused, arguing that Samantha's death had been nothing more than a tragic accident. They claimed there was no concrete proof that he had harmed his wife and that the entire case was built on circumstantial evidence. They suggested that she could have wandered out alone and slipped on the wet rocks, hitting her head before being carried away by the tide. However, the prosecution was relentless in dismantling Nathan's version of events. They meticulously walked the jury through the timeline of that fateful night, highlighting every contradiction in his statements. They presented the surveillance footage showing Nathan sneaking out of the hotel suite at 3:12 a.m., the forensic evidence of bloodstains found in the bathroom, and the testimony of Daniel Greaves, the tourist who had witnessed a heated argument between Nathan and Samantha on the beach. Most damning of all was the revelation of Nathan's financial struggles and the life insurance policy he had taken out on Samantha just months before the wedding. To the prosecution, this was not a case of an unfortunate accident, it was premeditated murder. Samantha's family sat in the front row throughout the trial, their faces etched with grief and determination. They had once believed that Nathan truly loved Samantha, but now they listened as the prosecution revealed a different story, a man who had married their daughter not out of love, but out of greed, and who had carefully planned to make her death look like a tragic accident. Nathan's defense attorneys knew they had an uphill battle, but they fought aggressively to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. They brought in forensic experts to challenge the findings, arguing that the small traces of blood in the hotel bathroom did not necessarily indicate foul play. It could have come from an innocent injury, like Samantha cutting herself or having a nosebleed. They suggested that Nathan's late-night walk on the surveillance footage did not prove he had done anything wrong. He could have simply been stepping out for air after an argument, upset, but not violent. They also worked hard to discredit the testimony of Daniel Greaves, the tourist who had seen Nathan arguing with Samantha near the cliffs. They argued that Greaves had been too far away to hear what was actually said, and that in the darkness of night, he could not have accurately identified Nathan and Samantha as the couple he saw. The defense also pointed out that Nathan's behavior after Samantha's disappearance was not proof of guilt. People react to grief in different ways, and just because his reaction seemed unusual did not mean he had killed his wife. The biggest challenge for the defense was explaining the life insurance policy. They tried to argue that many married couples take out life insurance policies, and that doing so was not necessarily a sign of malicious intent. However, the prosecution countered that Nathan's dire financial situation gave him a clear motive, making it highly suspicious that he stood to gain $1 million from Samantha's death. Despite the defense's efforts, the evidence against Nathan was overwhelming. The prosecution had woven a compelling narrative, backed by forensic findings, witness statements, and Nathan's own inconsistent testimony. The jury was given one final summary of the case: Nathan's motive, the evidence of a staged crime scene, the fact that Samantha's body had shown clear signs of blunt force trauma, and Nathan's attempt to leave the country before the investigation could fully conclude. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours, a remarkably short time given the complexity of the case. When they returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The judge asked the foreperson to read the verdict. The room fell into complete silence as the words were spoken. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Nathan Lowell, guilty of first-degree murder." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some gasped, others nodded in satisfaction. Samantha's family clutched each other's hands, their eyes filled with emotion. Justice had been served. Nathan, however, remained eerily calm. He did not cry, did not protest. He simply stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable, as if he had known this moment was inevitable. With the guilty verdict delivered, the judge handed down Nathan's sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no chance of freedom, no opportunity to start over. The media frenzy around the case intensified, with experts analyzing every detail of the trial. True crime documentaries were soon in production, dissecting the evidence and Nathan's chilling lack of emotion during the proceedings. However, even after the trial concluded, conspiracy theories began to emerge. Some speculated that Nathan had not acted alone, that he might have had an accomplice who helped him stage Samantha's death. Others wondered if the murder had been premeditated long before the honeymoon, or if it had been a crime of passion that escalated unexpectedly. Despite the questions that remained, one fact was certain. Samantha Lowell had trusted and married a man who, instead of loving and protecting her, had become the architect of her death. Her story became a tragic cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the person closest to you may be hiding the darkest intentions. As Nathan Lowell was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the media outside erupted in a frenzy. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and news vans lined the street, all eager to capture the downfall of the man who had once been seen as a perfect husband. Samantha's murder had captivated the public, turning into a true crime sensation that dominated headlines for months. Talk shows and news panels debated every aspect of the case, from Nathan's possible motives to the chilling way he had tried to stage her death as an accident. True crime enthusiasts analyzed the evidence, online forums were flooded with theories, and social media exploded with discussions about the trial. Some saw Nathan as a manipulative monster who had planned Samantha's murder from the beginning, while others argued that the prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence and that he might have been wrongly convicted. However, the majority of the public sided with Samantha's family, believing that justice had been served. In the days following the verdict, several major news outlets released in-depth documentaries about the case, featuring interviews with detectives, legal experts, and even former friends of Nathan and Samantha. Some of Samantha's close friends spoke out, sharing their lingering suspicions about Nathan even before the wedding, how he had always seemed too charming, too calculated. Her parents, though relieved by the conviction, expressed their deep sorrow that their daughter had trusted a man who had secretly been planning her demise. After the trial, Nathan was transferred to a maximum security prison to begin serving his life sentence. From the moment he arrived, his reputation preceded him. He wasn't just another inmate, he was the man who had killed his wife on their honeymoon for money. Other prisoners eyed him with curiosity and disdain, some even taunting him. However, Nathan maintained the same eerie composure he had displayed throughout the trial. He rarely spoke to other inmates, spent most of his time alone, and refused to participate in prison programs. Despite his silence, reports surfaced that he was struggling to adapt to life behind bars. He was no longer the powerful, charming investment banker who had manipulated people with ease. He was now just another prisoner, stripped of his wealth and influence. His once polished appearance faded, his neatly styled hair became disheveled, and the confidence he had exuded in court slowly drained away. Nathan continued to maintain his innocence, filing multiple appeals in an attempt to overturn his conviction. His legal team argued that the prosecution had exaggerated the evidence and that there was still no direct proof that he had murdered Samantha. However, each appeal was denied and the evidence against him remained overwhelming. Even with Nathan behind bars, there were still lingering questions that fascinated both investigators and the public. Had he planned to kill Samantha before the honeymoon, or had their arguments escalated into a violent attack that night? If it had been premeditated, why did he choose to do it so soon after their wedding? Some speculated that Samantha had discovered something about Nathan's financial troubles or personal life that night, leading to a confrontation that turned deadly. Another question that haunted investigators was whether Nathan had an accomplice. Some theorists believed that he couldn't have staged the crime scene alone, that perhaps a resort staff member or even someone from his personal life had helped him cover up the murder. However, no concrete evidence ever surfaced to support this theory. Additionally, some wondered if Nathan had intended to kill Samantha at all. Was it possible that he had simply wanted to scare her, and things had spiraled out of control? Had he lost his temper in a moment of rage and then panicked, staging the crime scene to cover up his mistake? These questions would never be answered, as Nathan refused to speak about what had really happened that night. In the wake of Samantha's tragic death, her family was determined to keep her memory alive. They established the Samantha Lowell Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence and raising awareness about the warning signs of abusive relationships. The foundation worked to provide legal assistance, emergency shelter, and counseling services to women who found themselves in dangerous situations. Samantha's parents also became vocal advocates for stronger laws protecting victims of domestic violence and financial abuse. They pushed for reforms that would make it harder for spouses to take out large life insurance policies without the knowledge of their partners. Their efforts led to discussions about the Samantha Law, a proposed bill aimed at preventing financial manipulation in marriages. Her friends and loved ones continued to share stories about her, how she had been full of life, how she had always dreamed of happiness, and how she had trusted the wrong person. Through their efforts, Samantha's story became more than just a tragic true crime case. It became a powerful message about the importance of recognizing red flags in relationships. Years passed, but Samantha's story remained in the public consciousness. True Crime Unfold continued to analyze the case, books were written about the trial, and her tragic honeymoon murder became a cautionary tale for those who ignored the warning signs of a dangerous relationship. Nathan, once a confident and successful man, faded into obscurity behind prison walls. The world moved on, but his name remained forever linked to one of the most chilling crimes in recent history. Despite his continued claims of innocence, no one believed him anymore. The evidence was clear, and the jury's decision had been final. Samantha's parents visited her grave regularly, ensuring that flowers were always placed there, a symbol of their everlasting love for their daughter. Though they had found some closure, the pain of losing her in such a brutal way never truly faded. They found solace in knowing that her story had saved others, that women in toxic relationships had recognized their own situations through Samantha's case and had escaped before it was too late. In the end, Samantha's murder was not just a story of loss and betrayal. It was a lesson about trust, deception, and the darkness that can sometimes hide behind the face of love.